Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for today's presentation on how to Airbnb your IRA property. My name is Brenda Wetzel. I've been with the company for 8 years now, and I will be presenting. If you do have any questions, please type them into the questions tab on the right side of your screen instead of the chat box. That way we can make sure we get all of your questions answered. All right, just a little bit of a background about Midland IRA. So we have two services that we focus on. The first one, we are self-directed IRA administrators, and we allow our clients to invest in alternative assets using their self-directed IRA. The other side of our business is we are 1031 exchange qualified intermediaries. So that's great for people that already own investment property. They could defer capital gains by doing a 1031 exchange. We have three offices. We have one here in Fort Myers, Florida. That's where I'm based out of. One in Chicago. And then we have our trust company out in South Dakota, Sioux Falls. So we currently have over $2 billion in client assets, and we are fully insured by the FDIC corporation. We make no commission. We do not sell investments. We do not give legal advice. We are not tax advisors. So this presentation is for educational purposes only. So please be sure to do your research before engaging in any investments. All right, so what is a self-directed IRA? A self-directed IRA is no different than any other type of IRA. That what makes a self-directed IRA special is that you can invest in alternative assets outside of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. So most IRA custodians will only allow you to invest in the stocks and bonds and mutual funds, whereas we allow you to invest in pretty much anything as long as it's for investment use only. There's only two things that you can't invest in using an IRA, and that is life insurance and collectibles. Pretty much anything else you can invest in. And a lot of IRAs are funded by old 401ks. So these are just a few options that you can invest in here at Midland. Real estate, I would say, is probably our most popular one here in Florida. We also allow you to invest in promissory notes where you can lend money out of your IRA and essentially be the bank. You can invest in single member LLCs, private placements, and private stock. We do futures and Forex trading and also precious metals. So for today, we're going to discuss how to Airbnb your IRA property. So to get started, the first thing you would need to do is open a self-directed IRA by filling out our application. You can fill out our application by going to our website at apply.midlandtrust.com. Once you are completing the application, you'll be asked how you're going to fund your IRA. There are three ways to fund your self-directed IRA. The first one would be to make a personal contribution. There are contribution limits depending on your account type. The second way to do it would be an IRA to IRA transfer. So maybe you have an IRA invested in stocks over at Fidelity or Charles Schwab. You can do a full or partial transfer over to us, and that is tax-free. You could also do a 401k rollover. So if you have a 401k at a past employer, you can actually roll that over into a self-directed IRA with us and defer all of the taxes. Next, you'll choose your investment. So in this case, we want to rent our property out to be an Airbnb property. So there's really two ways that you can do this. One would be inside of an LLC, and the other one would be outside of the LLC. So here's a comparison between doing the two different purchase strategies. If you were to do it not inside of an LLC, your IRA would be in the name, your investment would be in the name of the IRA. So it would be Midland Trust as custodian for benefit of your name and your account number. The property is titled in the name of the IRA. Everything is titled in the name of the IRA, including the cable, electric, water. All expenses would need to be paid for by the IRA. So if you need a bill cut and sent somewhere, you would log on to your online account, tell Midland where you want us to send the bill, and we'll send the check for you. All income will return to the IRA. Being that this would be an Airbnb property, you would need to submit a deposit coupon when you have rental income returned, so we know where it's coming from. The other way would be to open an LLC inside of your IRA and put the property inside of the LLC, and then have your property used for Airbnb purposes. So to do this, your LLC is the investment owned inside of your IRA. Then you would purchase the property inside of the LLC. The property is titled in the name of the LLC. All expenses would be paid for by the LLC. The owner does have checkbook control, so there won't be any need to come to Midland to ask to send a check. The LLC holder will get to have checkbook control and direct where they would like the checks to be written on their own. All income would be returned to the LLC, and everything is in the name of the LLC, including the cable, electric, and water. So with Airbnbs, we have found that the easiest route to do this would be to go the LLC route. So who cannot rent my Airbnb? So the same rules applies to doing just a regular real estate IRA investment inside of your IRA. There would be no personal use, so you can never stay inside of your Airbnb rental. It's for investment uses only. So that means it's not your secondary, your vacation home. It's truly for investment use. And then lastly, no prohibited parties can stay at your Airbnb. So this includes any ascendants and descendants. So yourself, your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, and then your children and their grandchildren, they're all disqualified from renting your Airbnb property. So since we're going to go the LLC route to purchase our Airbnb property, you must first set up your LLC. So the first step would be to open your IRA with Midland and get it funded, as we went over earlier. Next, you would need to establish a newly formed LLC inside of the IRA. After your LLC is formed, you will then purchase the property inside of your LLC. And then, like I mentioned, all expenses will be paid for by the LLC and all income must be collected by the LLC. Once you have the LLC set up and you have purchased your property, you'll then want to set up your listing onto Airbnb. So to do this, you'll add your listing on Airbnb by setting up the calendar rates and any other fees you want the renter to pay. For example, if there's any park fees or any other fees that are associated with the neighborhood that you want them to pay upon their visit, you could put that all inside the Airbnb setup. It's also been suggested to space out your listing to include time to clean your Airbnb. So you don't want to have someone check out at 12 o'clock and then a new renter come in at 3 o'clock. You want to leave a day or so to have someone be able to come in and clean your Airbnb. There are two ways you could set up your Airbnb, and one would be instant booking. The other would be contact to book. If you set up instant booking, the renter has the option to just log on to Airbnb, say they want to rent your place, and book it immediately. If you set up contact to book, you'll be contacted. You'll get to kind of screen them, see if they're the type of renters that you want staying in your Airbnb, and then you can approve the rental. So this is good because maybe you don't want a bunch of college students renting out your property. You'd rather have more of a family doing it or a nice couple renting it. So a lot of people do prefer to do the contact to book route if they care about those things. So when setting up your listing, you want to make sure that it has a ton of good pictures, a good write-up to entice the renters, and then also a good description of the surrounding area. So you want people to be able to come on there and get a good idea of what they're renting without having to contact you for more information. All right, so here are some fees that are associated with Airbnb rentals. The first one would be host fees. So for Airbnb, they charge a 3% fee to host. This would be paid for using your IRA. Renter fees, so they pay the sales tax, so you don't have to worry about this. You will get paid on the first or second day of the arrival, minus the taxes and fees. Airbnb will send that to you via ACH deposit if you'd like, and it'll go right back into your LLC. If there's any damage with your Airbnb property, you can claim that and report that to Airbnb. You just have to do that within 3 days of departure. You could also put your listing up on VRBO. They do charge more than Airbnb. They charge 10% of the individual rental, or they charge $500 a year plus a 5% rental fee. The benefit of setting it up on both sites is you can actually sync your listings. So you don't have to worry about it being rented one weekend by VRBO and then now you have to go take it off of Airbnb that weekend. It'll sync up so that you can only focus on one listing. All right, some other things to be aware of. Tourist tax. Sometimes Airbnb will not take into account the tourist tax. This is something that you would need to pay from the LLC. County taxes also might not be collected from Airbnb and will need to be paid for from the LLC. UBIT. So, with any short term rental, UBIT might apply. So, that's unrelated business income tax. So, any rentals that are 7 days or less could be subject to UBIT. Now, I'm not a CPA or tax advisor, so I really can't go into detail about that. But a way to avoid UBIT would be to have your rentals be more than 7 days long. All right, so preparing your Airbnb for arrival and departure. So some people prefer to hire a property manager to manage the property for them rather than doing it on their own. The benefits of doing this is maybe you don't live close to your Airbnb property and it's not easy for you to access it regularly. Another good reason would be they're going to handle all of the fees, the rental income when it comes back in. They'll make sure it gets to you and back into your LLC. They'll schedule the cleaning lady for you, and they'll make sure everything is set up for your guests when they arrive. So that is a good benefit of having a property management company do it. You'll want to make sure that the property is inviting. By doing this, you want to make sure that the air conditioning is set to a good temperature, the fans are on, the blinds are open. You want to make it very inviting and welcoming. So when they walk in, they're impressed with your property and they're bound to give you a good review when they leave. Another nice feature for Airbnbs is a welcome guide. So I've stayed at a bunch of Airbnbs and I've been provided with these nice guides that tell me places to eat in the area, things that I can do. There's important contact information in it. So those are all things that the guests would find helpful for them. Gate code. So if there is a gate code, you'll want to make sure that you give that to your renter in advance. Maybe that you need to call the gate and give them a heads up that you do have renters staying and add them to the gate code or the gate list to let them in. So you might want to do that in advance. You'll need to schedule the housekeeper. Like I said, if you have a property manager, this is something that they would do for you. You want to have repair services on call. Once again, if you have a property manager, luckily they'll worry about this thing for you. But if you don't have a property manager, you might want to have some frequent repair services on call, like a plumber or anybody that might be able to come out for an emergency service. Make sure you have the time to set this up. So the person that I interviewed that does this in his IRA with us said it took him about 10 hours to set up the listing, take good pictures, make sure everything is ready to go. And then it took him about 2 to 4 hours a week to manage that property. So it is a little bit of a time consuming investment. A lot of Airbnb rentals have items for guests to use, such as laundry soap, dishwasher pods, paper towels, toilet paper, shampoo. Those are all nice amenities to provide for the guest. As well as some Airbnb listings will provide old bikes, a nice gas grill, pool and beach toys, kayaks. So it just depends on the area and where you're living about what type of amenities that a renter might find appeasing for them. All right, so we're just going to discuss the fees before I get to the questions. So to open your IRA with Midland, we charge a new account setup fee of $50. We then have an annual asset fee of $325 per year per asset in the account. So if you just open one LLC, that is just considered one asset. Next, we charge a $100 transaction fee when establishing the LLC. And we charge $695 to set up the LLC and also the state filing fee. And that's obviously based on the state that you're in. Once the LLC is set up and established, you will also be responsible for paying the renewal fee, the state renewal fee, using your LLC. All right, so that is pretty much it. Now I'm going to go over to the questions. All right, so does it matter where the property is located? Can it be out of the US? Yes, it can be out of the US. It does. I'm sure there are some countries that have different rules, but if you contact us, we can help figure out if that is allowed. Can we get a replay of the webinar? Yes, this is going to be sent to you immediately when the webinar is complete. What if we wanted to rent, not own, an Airbnb property with owner's permission? Can we pay the rent out of the IRA? All right. So if you want to just rent an Airbnb property to stay in it, unfortunately, you cannot use your IRA funds because IRAs are used for investment purposes. So really, there's no investment that you're making by renting someone else's Airbnb. The purpose would be to purchase a property to and rent out yourself. Can you move existing property that is in an IRA into an LLC at a later date? That is an excellent question. I know you are not allowed to move a property that you currently already own that you currently already own personally into an IRA. But I will find out if you can move a property from your IRA to an LLC at a later date. Okay. Can the rental management company be owned by a relative? So your IRA is disqualified from doing business with any lineal ascendants and descendants. So like that list that I went over, any um, your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, your grandchildren, all those people, they cannot own the rental management company. But if the person owning the rental management company is a non-lineal ascendant or descendant, like your aunt, uncle, brother, sister, cousin, yes, those people are allowed. All right. Can we personally set up the listing and field the guest communication, or does this have to happen through a property manager since it's owned by a self-directed IRA? No, it does not. You do not need to work with a property manager. It is completely fine for you to set up the listing, of course, on your own. And then I would say instead of instant book, I would say contact to book. That way you can have more of an open communication with the guest. You do not need a property manager. And even with a property manager, you could just have the property management company, go and clean up the property after, prepare for the guests, make sure the AC and everything is on at the right temperature. You don't have to use the property management company to uh, manage the listing by like setting it up or screening the guests. You could do that all on your own. All right. I do own an Airbnb, but not in my IRA. I would like to discuss this closely. Okay. All right, Abby, that sounds good. If you have my email address on the screen right there, just so I have your information, if you could just shoot me an email with your contact information, I will reach out to you or have one of our client services reps reach out to you. All right. When setting up the property to be rented, remodeling, fixing it up, can I stay in it? So unfortunately, if even 1% of your property is owned by the IRA, you cannot even stay in it 1% of the time. So no, you cannot stay in it. Will this be completely automated once you have the right price properties purchased in your IRA? So I'm not 100% sure about this question, what you mean exactly. Yes, I guess once you do have your IRA, your property purchased inside of the IRA, and then once you have it set up on Airbnb with the calendar listings and set up with the dates and the fees, then I guess, yes, it would run automatically. If you did an instant book, you really don't need to even talk to the guests too much. So, yes, I would say it does run automatically. Airbnb would then cut you a check once the person or the renter shows up to the property, and it would go right back into your LLC that is owned here at Midland. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. Is there any other? Oh, sorry, it came in. Looks like we have another question. Oh, yes, automation of all the Airbnb business activities. Yes. So once the Airbnb is set up once the property is set up onto Airbnb, then I would say yes, it is automatic from there. You'll set, like I said, you set up the calendar dates, you set up the fees, and if you do an instant book, Airbnb does that all on their own. You'll just have to worry about setting up the cleaning crew to come. Okay. How often do you see IRAs get disqualified by the IRS and other owner penalized? I imagine from time to time someone could make a mistake. If you make one mistake and pay a bill out of the wrong account, will the IRS disqualify the IRA, or can you correct your mistake? Okay. So I'm not sure how often people get in trouble by the IRS. Really, the way to get in trouble would be you're going to get audited by the IRS, and then they're going to find out that you're doing something wrong. Like, for example, if you own a property inside of your IRA and you're really living in it and not renting it out for investment use, the IRS is eventually could notice that you're getting all your mail sent there, that you're not using it for investment purposes, and the penalties far outweigh any of the benefit that you're gaining from doing that illegally. Now, obviously, mistakes are made, and sometimes you might pay a bill personally on accident, um, not using your IRA funds. If that's the case, we would like to try to correct it if there's still time. By doing that, you would then maybe pay that bill using your IRA funds and then get a refund on the initial bill that you had paid personally. So I don't think I'm not the IRS, so I'm not sure if they're going to flag you based on every little thing wrong that you do. But you want to try your best to follow the rules. And if you do something incorrectly, we'll try to correct it the best that we can. All right, let's see what else we have here. Just to circle back to that question about moving your IRA property into an IRA owned LLC later, you can definitely do that, it appears. You would just need a quick claim warranty deed. Um, so another question. Okay. How do we find and purchase these properties to use for Airbnb? Do we have a reputable contact to help with this, or do we locate these properties ourselves? So yes, you would need to locate the properties yourself. So, um, think about good areas that renters are going to want to visit. If we're in Florida, so for us, it would be a place near the beach might have a higher rental return, maybe places by the airport. You just want to be in a good area that you think renters would want to rent your property out. But you would have to locate these properties yourself, which is why a good realtor would be a nice contact to have. Um, and I'm sure there are tons of realtors, so I'm sure you'll have no problem finding help on getting an investment property. Can I put multiple properties from my IRA into one LLC? Yes, you can. And that is one of the benefits of opening an LLC inside of your IRA rather than just investing in the property outright. So, by doing it this way, you would open one LLC, and then underneath that LLC, you would purchase your rental properties from there. So there's no limit to how many rental properties that you can purchase underneath the LLC. Um, this is great because you'll have checkbook control. And then also, instead of paying $325 per piece of real estate inside of your retirement account, you'll just pay the one 325 fee for the LLC, and you can own as many properties underneath it. All right. If the property is international, how are the taxes handled on the income? So any taxes would need to be paid for using your IRA funds. So if there are any taxes associated with the country that you are purchasing it in, then your IRA would need to pay those directly from your IRA. All right. I thought that our self-directed IRA account is an entity by itself. Why do we still need to open another LLC? So you don't need to open an LLC. The person that I spoke to that does Airbnbs inside of his IRA has done it outside of an LLC and inside of an LLC. And based on his experience, the LLC was a lot easier because he was able to cut checks easily. He was able to title everything under the name of the LLC. It just made it a lot more simple with the Airbnb process. But if you're just looking to purchase an investment property using your IRA funds, and not doing it in the Airbnb, then there is no reason to do an LLC because you are correct. Your IRA is an entity in itself, and you do not need to form an LLC. It's just an option. All right. Still going through the questions here. Can the LLC hold an undivided interest in a property? If so, what percent? So you can, if I'm reading this question properly, your LLC can own only a percent of the property, and it can be any percent of the property. So it doesn't have to be a 50-50. It can be 10-90, 20-80, whichever percent you would like it to be. Okay. I believe IRA that is owned in an LLC. Wait, I believe IRA that is owned LLC is a single member LLC. Does it have full protection? So yes, your LLC would still have the same FDIC insured insurance as your rental property owned inside of your IRA, not an LLC. In a partnership, will we need to have two separate LLCs? Uh, you're saying like the other partner would have an LLC too? I mean, your LLC inside of your IRA is just your LLC. So if you would like to do a partnership with someone else, um, and you want them to have an LLC, then yes, they would have to have their own LLC as well. See if I read that correctly. Yes, a relative can hold an interest in a property. So, all relatives can actually partner with you to make an investment. So, like I said, all lineal ascendants and descendants, like your spouse, parents, grandparents, grandchildren, children, those people can't rent your IRA owned property, but they can partner with you to purchase that IRA owned property. Once again, they would never be allowed to stay in that property either. And yes, like I said, your IRA, your LLC does have the same protection limits as your IRA owned property. I have an issue with a management company. They have to issue a 1099. What can we do about that? I don't think, I mean, do you have any more clarification on this, Mina? If you could maybe email me after, I can help you out with that. Because typically a 1099 is released when you do a distribution from your retirement account. So I'm not sure why the management company would need to do that. Um, all right. See if there's anything else. Oh, making a question more clear. I already have an LLC owned by an IRA running Airbnb. However, the property manager doesn't understand it and issued a 1099. Despite that, I just need to send a valuation to the IRS and I don't need to report an income. That is very bizarre. I have no idea why they would have issued you a 1099. I Yes, I mean, you're correct. You'll just have to do a fair market valuation each year on that property, but you should not need to receive a 1099. Um, I'll look into your account if it's with us, Mina, and I will reach out to you afterwards to see more about that. Okay. All right. So I believe I covered everyone's questions. I was going back and forth here between the chat box and the questions tab. So if I did miss your question, I apologize. That is my contact information. I'd be more than happy to speak to any of you afterwards if you do have more questions or would like more information. Otherwise, that will conclude our presentation today. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.